Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome. It's time for a little Orange Bloods Live as we react to the college football playoff updated rankings. They've just came out. No surprise, Longhorns still sitting at number 10, but a lot of little things to kind of parse in between. Do us a solid, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. And by all means, jump into the Specs chat, chat it up, send us some super chats. We're talking rankings. Mr. Richardson, I don't want to dominate. I'm sure I'll have a chance to speak on the top 25. But Chad, go ahead and pull up the top 25, and Anwar, your initial reaction to the totality of the top 25.
Well, it's really interesting, Catch. My overall thought is like, damn, Texas is hanging on by a thread here. And, I guess you could say, well, Oklahoma has inherited that thread at this moment, right? Because they're first team out. Last week, Texas was first team out, right? So I think Texas moved up a spot, didn't they, Chad, from 11 to 10?
Correct.
Yeah, so Texas moves up a spot. So they get to go from the Jeopardy thing, right? But it's just not many surprises on the top of the board. Texas moves up one, but it just means that Texas, golly, you got to win, man. Like, you've got to win. You've got to win this weekend. Like, you look at that, but keep that there for a chat. Mm-hmm. If Texas loses this upcoming weekend, they fall behind several, potential teams, at that point. I don't even know if they even take a Vanderbilt that may only have 2 losses versus over a Texas that has 3. I just feel like the win now mentality has to be there. That ends up being my biggest takeaway.
So what about you, Chad?
I mean, I think it's kind of the way I thought about it last week in terms of Texas's perspective. I just see blinking lights for Texas at 5-3. You're playing those 2 teams, and this week it should be about taking Georgia's spot. Just think of it that way. But Anwar's right in terms of a loss. They might slide past. They'd go all the way down to that Miami slot probably, or right above the Miami positioning. The other thing that jumps out to me is, where was the ACC team? They put Miami up above all other ACC teams this week, even with the 2 losses, and Georgia Tech's right there. So even more evidence, I think, Catch, that we're looking at one ACC team gets in, but the loser of that championship game probably does not.
By the way, can I say what last thing on that one? And I'm happy that my South Florida Bulls are in too. Okay, that's it. All right, go ahead.
Look out. Come on now.
The alma mater for all 3 of us is represented.
They're in Anwar. They'd be in right now. 12 seed.
They'd be in.
So I think the thing that was most interesting to me, and we talked a little bit about this, I can't remember if it was on the Overreaction Monday show or if it was on our show, Chad, but BYU got dump trucked. But one of the things that we saw the AP voters couldn't do is it kind of painted themselves into a corner with their positioning of Utah. You couldn't drop BYU below Utah because Utah has 2 losses and one of them is to BYU. But you couldn't really punish BYU at all without punishing Utah at the same time. So they put Utah at a certain spot, and then BYU gets obliterated. And I think in a world where Utah doesn't exist, I think BYU might be below Miami and the teams that maybe below Georgia Tech.
Yeah, interesting that it is interesting they fell. You're right. It fell right on top of BYU there, only to 12.
And I had joked on Sunday, one of my favorite things about the AP poll of all time was that BYU got curb stomped like that in Lubbock against a Tech team that we don't even know is for real, really. That's not an undefeated Tech team. That's a team that caught an L in the Big 12 play. Slow down, everybody.
Yeah, and as we talked about, they whipped them, and it could have been even worse if Tech just catches footballs and doesn't kick field goals.
It was the most 40-something to nothing game out of a whatever it ended up being. So I thought Texas Tech I thought BYU would get punished. And Utah is BYU's great ally. And I think the point that Anwar makes is the astute one, and I think I'm just piggybacking off of it. What tonight's rankings told us if Texas and Oklahoma both put it back up real quick, Chad, the top 25, because both Texas and Oklahoma have humongous road games this weekend.
Right.
If either of those two teams loses, BYU and Utah are probably going to jump over both of them. And I think suddenly the Big 12's a real problem with maybe being a two. I think them not being able to punish BYU because of Utah means that the Big 12's probably more of a threat to be a two-bid league than I'm giving them credit for, because I did not think necessarily that next week I guess what they're telling us right now is that a one-loss BYU team. Now, who knows how they would treat a BYU team that lost to Tech a second time. But I think 9-3, based on the way that they've positioned these teams, it does feel if Texas and Oklahoma lose, what probably happens, I think, is that Texas and Oklahoma fall down. And I think Texas stays above both of them. And so it maybe depends on the way they might lose to Georgia, but I could totally see a flip-flop of those two things. You can take that down. And I think that's a real interesting part of the rankings. There's two Big 12 teams below two SEC teams. And then right after the two Big 12 teams is another SEC team that would have a better record than Texas, but lost to Texas. And if you're not supposed to punish Texas because of the tough scheduling of Ohio State, then they're a two-loss team with an asterisk in this head-to-head battle. I don't know. It's really curious to see what happens this weekend and where Texas and Oklahoma would both be left, given that there's still a bunch of other two-loss teams that the USCs and the Michigans of the world, that you wonder how far they might drop both of those two teams. But just like Utah, Anwar, was a safety net for BYU when they lost, you could make a case that Vanderbilt is the safety net for Texas and Oklahoma, Texas specifically, because they did win that game. Yeah. And I think it's good. You won't want to punish Vanderbilt and drop them just like you wouldn't have wanted to punish Utah. Yeah. It does mean that maybe Texas, as long as they don't get boat raced, and look, maybe it doesn't matter based on what happened with BYU this weekend, but it might be that they only fall as far as right where Vanderbilt is at, and then at least they're still ahead of some of these other teams that we're talking about, Michigan, USC, Georgia Tech, Miami, and so on.
You know, it's interesting, though, Catch, if that did happen, what would be interesting is, for me, Catch, if Texas beats Arkansas next week, that probably doesn't move the committee at all. Nah. So then, is there anything that any other team could do to leapfrog them next week? The following after Arkansas, before Texas A&M, right? That, you know, because, you know, that's, again, these are worst case scenarios. This is why I say you got to win on Saturday. Like, you don't want to F around and find out. But if you drop, like you said, you might be ahead of certain teams, but are there any teams behind you that 2 weeks from now can have a victory that kind of pushes them up, pushes Texas down a little bit, and now Texas is really, you know, like Miami, for instance, right?
I'll answer this for you. I have all this in front of me. Give me just a second. I'm pulling it up. So one by one, if we're talking about the teams, and put the top 25 back up, Chad, because I think this is – so if we go one by one of the two lost teams next couple of weeks, Notre Dame's got Pittsburgh, Syracuse, and Stanford to end the season. So they've got really good positioning over Texas. If we go to where we got BYU, I didn't even list them this week because I really thought they had stubbed their toes something fierce. We'll circle back to BYU in a second. BYU they've got the game against Cincinnati. I don't know. Cincinnati's not, I guess they're 25.
Right. So that's a ranked win for BYU.
20, they're 20, Catch. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, 25. I apologize.
Yeah, so I mean, They do have that. And BYU's in a good, I think ultimately the ace in the hole for Texas is that they will get another top 5, top 3 opponent in A&M, and nobody else will have that. But Vanderbilt, looking at them, they've got the game at Tennessee. You look at Miami, they're at home, NC State, at Virginia Tech, and at Pittsburgh to end the season. Those last 2 games aren't gimmies. I don't think that there's a win in there before Texas plays Texas A&M that would move necessarily Miami. But there's, again, where this gets really tricky is if I think you take Vanderbilt out of the mix, Chad, you can see where Miami, Georgia Tech, USC, Michigan, just that group of teams, you might be able to justify dropping Texas and Oklahoma below all of them because of the 2-loss, 3-loss thing. Except, I'm telling you, Vanderbilt is just lodged right in the middle of that.
Yeah, but the key of
Utah was this week for BYU. And look, what happened to BYU? We could argue they don't deserve to be at 12.
Right.
But you can't argue that they should be below 13 because they beat Utah. And there's this weird dynamic that I think maybe the best thing that could happen to Oklahoma is that they've got Texas right next to them. So whatever happens to Texas kind of has to happen to Oklahoma a little bit. I'm really fascinated to see what it will look like for both of those 2 teams, with Vanderbilt presumably moving up from 14 to 12. Or does Texas just drop from 10 to 12 because they would have to stay in front of Vanderbilt, who the committee is telling us is ranked ahead of all of these other teams? And no, Anwar, I don't think anybody plays anybody this weekend. USC gets to play Iowa. So there's a world out there where maybe from 17 – they get a bump up because they play Iowa next. Michigan gets Northwestern. Other than that, there's not a lot of meat on the bone for these teams. None of them are playing the teams up top, which is how they would really make a move.
Right. Chad, I think you have a thing you say. Please keep that graphic up, though, because, Chad, I have a question for Catch.
Yeah, USC does have Iowa, who's 21st in the ranking, so it would be a kind of like the BYU thing. The other thing to realize, of course, is BYU is above Utah, not just because they beat them, because their record is better. Yeah. We realize if Texas loses, they will fall below Vanderbilt because it doesn't matter that they beat Vanderbilt at that point. If they lose,
I think it might, because they have the Ohio State thing, Chad, and the committee has told us the reason why they've got Texas at the top of the pile, other than Notre Dame, of 2-loss teams, because they're not punishing them for that Ohio State game, even though they have the worst loss. At this point, you might even say the Florida loss is worse than the way BYU lost to Texas Tech, because Florida's the second worst team in the conference right now. Like, whatever they might have been when that game was played, they are what they are now. It's a bad loss. Texas isn't really getting punished for that. Like, that loss is not somehow move them below a Georgia Tech or a Miami or a USC or a Michigan, all teams with 2 losses. And in the case of a team like Michigan, I think both of their losses also to ranked teams. I think the committee has favored Texas quite a bit in the first couple of rankings. I'm not convinced that they would fall below Vanderbilt, even with one more loss than them in the. It would be interesting to see how they would position that.
But now, here's what I want to ask you this, Catch, right? And again, let's say they lose to Georgia, right?
Yes.
I know you said about the 2 weeks. What about final week? Because I think the assumption is, hey, if Texas can beat Texas A&M, they get in. But that's rivalry week, right? So Michigan plays Ohio State that week as well, right? So as when you were doing that schedule, I'm curious as to what the final week looks like for some of these teams, because those teams have impressive wins as well, and then Michigan, Ohio State comes off the top of my head.
I just think the 2 things I said that would be the primary things that Texas would need to have happen, because if Texas drops below a number of these teams with a 3rd loss, their ace up their sleeve is that the committee will be able to point to an A&M win and say, that's the best win that anybody has. And, oh, by the way, they also have Oklahoma. They also have Vanderbilt. They will have 3 really big dog resume wins.
But Michigan would have knocked off the number 1 team in the country.
Right. Michigan, that's what I was about to say. What have I said since yesterday? They need Texas Tech to win the Big 12, really to put another smudge on BYU, and then they need Ohio State to beat Michigan. What they don't want in a 9-3 scenario is Michigan to be 10-2, having just beat the number 1 team in the country. I think at that point, Michigan is a thorn, because also the other element about that is now where this could get interesting is, what if Oregon fell off by the wayside? We know that the committee's not respecting their record right now. What happens? They're the lowest of the one loss teams other than BYU. If they were to lose to Washington in the season finale, they're probably out, or at least it's a real conversation, because you'd be talking about a 2-loss Oregon with no resume wins, really, versus a 3-loss Texas that lost to Ohio State but has 3 more resume wins than Oregon would have. I'm telling you, Oregon's in a precarious position, because none of those they play USC. So there's but that game's at home. But then they go on the road at Washington. I think Washington was just recently ranked. They're one of those kind of 25 through 40, if I'm not mistaken, type teams. All things to keep an eye on. But I think ultimately, win, as Anwar keeps saying. But if it goes 9-3, your best friends are Texas Tech and Ohio State beating Michigan. Just get them out of the paint. And I think almost everything else might work its way out. But Michigan running the table and going 10-2 is a fly in the ointment that feels like it would be very problematic for Texas.
You guys want to take a look at the bracket a second? Anwar, have you ever been to the Grove?
Yeah, just one more thing on that. Hold on on that for a second, chat. One more thing on that. Catch. What if Oklahoma did what has a repeat of last year and they beat Alabama? Well,
they go 10-2 and Texas is 9-3. They'll be ahead of Texas.
What do you think happened? And but then now all of a sudden, if Oklahoma wins and Texas loses, is that just positioning? That's just Alabama falling a few spots, Oklahoma going up a few spots, but no real impact on Texas?
Well, I think the impact on Texas would be that Oklahoma would. I think Oklahoma finishes the season 10-2. They're in.
Yeah,
they're in. So and their schedule is not real tricky after this weekend. They're at home against Missouri and they play LSU. Yeah. Now those aren't layups, but those aren't 3-point shots either. Those like little baby mid-range jump hooks, right?
Little mid-range stuff.
Little Shaq jump hooks.
Watch out for that Missouri. That Missouri one could get them.
I agree, but that's OU playing at home,
right? And Missouri. Right, Missouri still got the third quarterback. You're right.
I don't know, and who knows what Missouri's got left in the tank after this past weekend. Yeah. They may be done without their quarterback, but regardless, that takes away that. Remember, way back in the very beginning on yesterday's show, Anwar, I said I'm going to read out a bunch of scenarios. Blink speak up when. So here are the scenarios. Texas loses to Georgia, they finish 9-3. OU loses to Alabama. Vanderbilt loses to Tennessee, or doesn't. May or may not matter, but it would behoove Texas at that point if Tennessee could handle that for them in Knoxville. USC loses at Oregon. Michigan loses to Ohio State. That was the one, Anwar.
I jumped off at that point.
So when we talk about these are the things, all of those things need to happen in addition to Tech needs to win the Big 12. And what was the other one? The Tech needs to win and Ohio State needs to beat Michigan. You can add that other list. If any of those things don't happen, especially OU losing to Alabama, it all changes. But those, I think, are expected results. But if one of those things changes, for instance, USC beats Oregon and they run the table, they're 10-2. That's probably problematic for Texas. They don't want those teams to be 10-2. They want them to be 9-3 because I think Texas is at the top of the 9-3 pile.
Right. Because the assumption there would be that if USC went on that run, they're still not getting to the Big Ten title game.
Who is
Or
that?
Would USC be in the Big Ten title game discussion if they got that kind of run going?
I don't believe so because Ohio State and Indiana are undefeated.
Right. Yeah. They're obviously they're tracking that way. So ultimately there are two extra spots available at this moment
for at-larges. Like really, like there's that Notre Dame and Texas are the final two.
Right. If Notre Dame's in, there's like two extra spots.
So there's one. That's the spot Texas would be fighting for unless Oregon crapped their pants or did something like that.
Well, there'd be two extra spots, right? If only one ACC team is getting in.
Well, yeah, but that's assuming that there is only one Big 12 and one ACC.
Right. I'm assuming both Big 12s now. I'm assuming two in the Big 12.
Why would you assume that?
Well, I'm just the idea of BYU.
Why would you assume it though? Because if BYU loses to Tech a second time, they're not putting BYU in, even though they would have been 11-1. Right. They're not putting a team in that has really no resume win. Their resume win is they beat Utah. We don't even know what that means. Right. And they would have lost to Tech twice. No, they're not doing that. So they just won't. That would be.
I'm just allowing for BYU winning is all I'm doing. I'm not saying what I think is going to happen, but
I'm just saying I'm not assuming that, but that's certainly.
So you think there's three extra slots?
At the end? If they're really, because I think some teams are just in, unless Oregon loses, they're in. I think Notre Dame, the way things are working, as long as they win, they're in. Texas is in this final spot.
Right.
That is in this week. Why is it in this week? Because BYU's not in it this week. One team dropped out. Texas moved up. But there's a world where if Texas loses, it gets real tricky from there. And I don't think BYU is the team for them to worry about. I think it is unless, and look, I've already said that. If Texas Tech doesn't win the Big 12, that's going to make that a two-league team, and Texas won't have a bid to worry about because they won't be able to jump Notre Dame, I don't think, unless they have the same record as Notre Dame. They won't punish Notre Dame with would be 10-2. It won't happen. Like, Notre Dame losing this weekend would be great for Texas.
Oh, God, it'd be huge. It'd be good for Texas. How many? It'd be good for everybody but Notre Dame.
But we start getting into this world of like, well, if A&M loses, that. What are some of the things that we've seen happen is now we have to start looking at some of these games. And look, Notre Dame at Pittsburgh. What do we think? That's 65-35 Notre Dame?
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
That's fair.
So you talk about it like it's more likely than not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think we all believe it is in the realm of possibilities that they could lose that game. Those types of things can happen, but it's a little bit like talking about Oregon losing at Washington.
Mm.
I'll tune into that game, but there's also a possibility that I'll stop watching before halftime.
Yeah, and Washington, right, because, Washington is, I guess they'd be kind of like Pitt in terms of what was Pitt even in this thing they're 22 in the CFP. I think Washington is 24 in the AP right now? Like Washington's down there somewhere. They're ranked, barely. Yeah. So it's kind of the same game. You're at that type of team. Dangerous enough. If it was
the SEC, Steve Sarkisian would tell you, hey, on the road anywhere in the SEC. I don't know if the same rule applies in that conference, but, it's not a layup. It's probably a free throw. But what I've tried to do is talk about all of these scenarios in the most realistic way possible. So in my realistic world, Oregon wins, Notre Dame wins, Notre Dame keeps its position. Where does Texas get the number from? Right. And the number has to be ACC and Big 12. Each only get one team. And they can't have Michigan fucking around with their slot because Michigan would be 10-2 and would have a win onward against the team that Texas is trying to hold its hand up and say, don't punish us because we lost to this team. If the team that you're talking about has a better one-loss record than you do, and that's because they beat the team you didn't beat, it's a hard argument to win.
Yeah.
Catcher, are you assuming Ole Miss wins out?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
They got nobody. They got nobody with a pulse in front of them.
I mean, they do play in Starkville.
I enjoyed that laugh, Anwar. Let's remember, the Egg Bowl is a game that literally turned on a player pretending to pee after a touchdown. That's a wild game, and they're going to Starkville. Just saying.
It is. But all I can say is, for all the talk about the cowbell noise, Mississippi State still doesn't win a lot of games. So I mean, it's like, oh, it's an intimidating environment. I'm like, for who? They stop for because they don't win there. So what does that mean?
No, it's one of those deals where it falls into the category of the other games we've discussed. I'll tune in. It could get frisky, but I don't know. It just feels like if we get to a point with Texas where we're like, hey, you know, these games that we think are like 70-30, 80-20, you're going to have to latch your hopes onto that. I've tried to keep it as simple as possible. But yes, any of these upsets involving teams in the bottom 6 through 10, like it doesn't hurt Texas at all. Yeah. But don't feel – I think this weekend Texas watched a lot of those teams play, Chad, and they walked away brokenhearted thinking that it wasn't a good weekend for them. And I kind of thought it was because of what happened in the ACC. And look, the one thing we know about them right now is they are boxed out in a way as it currently stands from any real conversation. You know, in a world where those two ACC teams, Louisville and Virginia, where they don't lose, it would be interesting to see what they would have done with BYU and Utah then, because you almost – again, it's tricky. These guys are trying to put together. Chad, you ever do one of those old Rubik's cubes in the day? I sucked at them, so I can't say
for about 12 seconds. And then I took a sticker off and tried to move it around, and I threw it away.
If you ever get to a point though where you have like a row almost good to go, you're like, oh,
yeah, maybe.
Like I got two of them side by side, and then you're like, I can't. I don't know how to get three in a row. Yeah. It's a little bit like that. You know, like you can look at it and just stare at it, and you're never going to improve it, no matter how hard you try.
All right, so we've hit a lot of the negative side of this in terms of the loss. What about the win? If Texas wins, what happens? Do they take Georgia's spot flat out? Do they just flip 10-5? What happens if Texas wins in Athens?
I think they'll move Tech up, and then Texas would be right below Texas Tech.
Okay. Right. Okay. I see. So maybe Texas is
7, like no, so it'd be 6.
5, 6.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, because Tech moves up to 5, and then Texas is right there at the 6th spot. So
what would they do with Georgia?
Right.
Like where look at that pile of teams, Chad. Put it back up.
Yeah.
Georgia loses its second game. Do they fall below Notre Dame?
You want the bracket or the list?
The list. If Texas wins, and let's just say they take Georgia's spot.
Right.
Notre Dame is ahead of Texas because Notre Dame has been more impressive than Texas.
And this will be Georgia's second loss, correct?
They lost their second loss, but
just Bama.
You know, their resume is not empty. I wonder at that point, would they stay in Notre Dame? I mean, would they take Notre Dame's spot and Notre Dame takes the Texas spot?
And then they might have Ole Miss as a cushion. Because since they beat Ole Miss, how far do you drop them below Ole Miss? They beat Ole Miss.
It would be
but maybe
even more. It might be even more fascinating what would happen with Georgia if they lost, because it really is kind of get squirrely for the committee as to how they would handle that. But it probably would give us an idea of how they would handle the 2 versus 3 loss thing, because there's a real urgent decision they would have to make about Georgia and Ole Miss that if Texas were to win, you wouldn't have to worry about. But like, what would you do with Vanderbilt and Texas is the same question. One team has the head-to-head over the other, but the other team has one less loss. How does the committee treat that? I keep thinking that they're not going to put Texas below Vanderbilt, but maybe. But would they do the same with Georgia and Ole Miss, or do they look at Ole Miss and go, they're unassailable? They've got one loss and one loss only, and Georgia has 2.
Right, because remember the little magic trick that the committee has is they can use the phrase comparable teams, and they can give you any reason for why they're not. or any reason why they are. And as soon as that loss number is different, they might tell you, no, we don't have to pay attention to what Texas did to Vanderbilt. Why would we pay attention to that? The record's totally different.
Man, this is why I know you're going to get to the brackets. This is why I've said this and I'll maintain it. I think the SEC going to a 9-game schedule is just I think they're going to end up doing more damage to themselves than good, because they're thinking, we go 9 games, we're just like everybody else. But they're the same conference that says we're not like everybody else because we place tougher competition. And so, to your point, Chad, if we get to a point where Georgia loses or something to that effect, Georgia's going to say, yeah, but look at our conference and look at who we played. And the committee says, I don't know. Notre Dame's ranked ahead of you. Then they're literally looking more at the record than they are level of competition. And the SEC just screwed themselves by adding in one more tough game to make it harder for them to get more teams in.
Yeah.
Hey, Chad, you know what I'm shocked we haven't heard Steve Sarkisian say once this season? If we were playing at 105 right now, we could have been more aggressive in the portal and gone out and got some players that could have impacted this season.
I bet a lot of coaches are thinking that right now.
But we're at 85, and so we just couldn't overextend ourselves the way we wanted to. It's a legitimate point. If you told me that Texas was at 105 right now and they would have known about it as early as the Big Ten teams did, the Big Ten teams had enough time. Like Nebraska was telling their walk-ons, hey, man, don't get comfortable. There literally might not be room for you if we take 105 scholarship players. At that point, just like Texas took a flyer on Matthew Caldwell, maybe they're able to take a couple flyers on offensive linemen that are better than Nick Brooks and Connor Stroh. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. We just talk about the scheduling disadvantage. Sure seems like the SEC keeps on volunteering, Anwar, for a bunch of these little slim margins that go against them.
Especially the fact that, because Anwar made a reference to them being like everybody else. Remember, fellas, right now there's 2 conferences that are still at 8. I haven't heard the ACC moving. The ACC plays 8 conference games, and I don't think they're changing. So everybody else, 3 of the Power 4s are going to play 9 conference games, and the other one's going to play 8. So at the end of the year, that could be an advantage.
I think the SEC has a Texas problem. They don't need Texas having those 2 rivalry games. In a perfect world of the SEC, I think Texas has just one rivalry game that has to be played every year. Because Arkansas is like, you're not leaving us out. You're not. We voted for a bunch of stuff because you were telling us, hey, because there's a world out there, a real one, where Texas being in the SEC is not good for Arkansas. It's worse for Arkansas than it is for A&M. And I just think that they've got a real Texas, because A&M doesn't have this problem. What game do they have to play every year, Chad?
Only Texas.
You couldn't make the case that the LSU game has to be played every year.
Nope.
No.
And Alabama, kind of the same thing. They have to play. What's
Bama's
the other one?
Tennessee.
They have to play that game?
People in that part of the country, I think, would tell you they do.
Okay.
I think the cigar game is big enough that they would tell you that's the other one they have to play.
But
we'd already figured that out. There's a weird thing with Texas where as they look at this 9-game, 8-game thing, I don't know.
But catch, not only let me piggyback off of that. Not only do I agree with what you're saying as relates to that, then add in this other problem where Texas is like, hey, you know what? We're going to have Ohio State next year. And guess what? 2027, we're going to have Michigan. That's going to be kind of cool. 2028, we're going to have Notre Dame. That's going to be kind of cool too. And then 2029, we're going to have Notre Dame again. That'd be kind of cool. Like,
because
let them get held out this year because of Ohio State, and let's see how long all those games stay scheduled.
It's because the SEC doubled down on the initial idea. Not only are we going to add 9 conference games, we're going to make everybody play a Power 4. Now, you could play a mid-level Power 4, a bottom-level Power 4, upper, but you got to play one. And the SEC's never done that.
And guess what? There's a lot of Power 4s that you can play that ain't ranked in the top 5 or ranked in the top 10 of the CFP.
That's true.
And Texas is stuck in this weird vortex because all what you're talking about, Chad, this scheduling happened years ago when Texas was in the Big 12 and they said to themselves, damn, we don't got enough home games or home and away games to really move the needle for our fan base. And so, we don't. When Texas A&M is gone, all we really have is Oklahoma. So they went out and started scheduling all these tough teams. Yep. But the main thing was it was to give the fans something to watch at home and something to travel to. Catch.
Oh, you're 100% right. Because they was like, hey, our home schedule is UTSA, UTEP, Baylor, Iowa State, Kansas, and it was just like Kansas State, right? It was like, man, we can't get people in the stands for this. So they said, man, let's go out and let's get all these tough teams. It's a great point.
But that was before you were in the SEC. Like now you're in the SEC, it's an easy sell to get everybody here for your Georgias and your Ole Misses and hell Vanderbilt, so all that. But now, because they're competing for a playoff catch, when they did it, they weren't competing for playoff spots. They were just trying to put butts in seats. Dude, now you're competing for playoff spots. You got to get past butts and seats. You got to get butts and seats for the fucking playoffs in December and January. That's what you got to worry about.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because moving forward now, CDC might want to change his thinking that this is coming. He may want to get Northwestern and Kansas on the speed dial and
get
maybe
that
not
lined up ASAP.
And not think about not think about USC and Michigan and Notre Dame so much. Might
Chad,
be a good
do me
idea.
a favor. Put the top 25 back up.
All righty. By the way, I see that super chat. We'll get to it, and I'll try to get the guys
in just a second
to explain it to me.
Plus, we're not going to stay on much longer. Texas, take that Ohio State game off the resume. Where is Texas in the rankings?
Top.
There might be an Ole Miss's spot.
I was going to say where Tech or Ole Miss, 6 or 7.
I think they're 6.
Yeah,
I think they're at 6.
Yeah.
And because they would have wins over 11 and 12, whereas Texas Tech would, even though Texas would have on paper the worst loss, they've got more good wins. And so in a world where they don't play Ohio State and they lose to A&M at the end of the season, or they just lose to Georgia this weekend, but they're at 6 when it happens. They win. They win out. They're in.
Yeah,
no questions.
Yeah, but that's also why this discussion of strength of ranking and all the stuff that they've added in. That's why if Texas loses by a little to one of these big teams coming and they beat the other, that's where we really need to see how they handle it, because it's a comment on a lot of things, but it is also a comment on being bold enough to schedule an Ohio State.
Texas right now is not better off for having played that game.
And the committee needs to make a statement there, because if they kick a team like Texas out, if they played a real close loss to Georgia, let's say, and they beat the Aggies, let's say they beat the Aggies convincingly, and they're left out, then that's where it's like, okay, you're telling teams like Texas, don't schedule other big-time teams. Just don't do it.
Yeah, but I mean, hell, yes. If you're Texas, and I think if you're any of these SEC teams going forward, you got to tell yourself, is it worth the risk? And yes, so I understand they're saying schedule Power 4, and maybe there ain't enough Power 4, bottom feeders to go around, but there's enough bottom feeders where you can tell yourself like, hey, like you said, let's get Colorado on the schedule. Deion's going to be gone in a couple of years, right? Like, I'm sure we'll be able to kick some ass right there, right? I mean,
and Anwar, you mentioned it earlier. Ketch mentioned it. It's that SEC schedule that Texas has not had in the previous years. It's a great point you guys are making, because if you can take, it's only going to be 3 non-conference now.
Yeah,
you're going to take those 3 non-conference and make them as winnable as you can. You've got an extra SEC game coming. That's an extra trip for your people to Gainesville, or an extra visit from LSU or whoever it's going to be. You got 9 of those now. So maybe you don't focus as much on what you need early, because the late version used to be, hey, can we get anybody to show up to see us play TCU? It's not like that anymore.
Too many fans are worried that it'll make Texas look like a bunch of pussies. And instead, what I would tell those fans,
I'm not saying get rid of the ones you got on the board now. I'm saying
no. Here is what Texas needs to try to be. If every decision that they make, are we the smartest person in the room or not?
Right.
Yeah. Everything's got to be, we're smarter than everybody else. And that's not what this feels like. We did a show in the spring where I was like, Texas should cancel the Ohio State game.
Yeah,
and it's for this exact conversation. And people are like, no, you're a pussy, Catch. We should never do that. And I was like, hey, man, I'm going to love the game. But the risk for the loser is too extreme. It leaves no margin of error that would otherwise exist. Because if you're Texas and you don't play Ohio State, that Florida game really is pretty meaningless.
Yeah, and we could also be living in a world right now, Catch. There's another universe where A&M lost at Notre Dame, and let's say LSU slightly different, and they beat them in Death Valley. The Aggies at 2 losses, you'd be saying the same thing about them. Why'd you schedule Notre Dame?
But I think it's if you want to challenge the committee, you challenge the committee to keep out a 10-2 SEC team. Yeah, challenging them to keep out.
It'll happen.
Yeah, challenging them to keep out a 9-3 SEC team. I'm like, they might be game. They might say, well, when you think about it, now 10-2, not so much, right? But that 9-3, it begins that tricky thing. That's why I'm saying why you scheduled it. We understand. You were trying to sell tickets. You're past selling tickets. Like this is not that Texas program where you're worried about selling tickets for an 8-4 team that's going to go to the Alamo Bowl or something like that. Maybe, God forbid, the Texas Bowl. Like, that's not where we're at. We're talking about a playoff contender. And to Ketch's point, you got to now shift your thinking and say to yourself, how do we make this easier? Chat, you keep tabs on the SEC. You know this by your book, right? How many of these SEC teams schedule absolute patsies before their rivalry games at the end of the year?
Oh, tons.
That's all of them. Just about, you look through all of them. They all have these damn just St. Mary, Mother of the Blind schools right before that. And you're like, think about if you're Texas, if you had an opportunity to have UTSA before Texas A&M. And that's probably better than these other programs got Nicholls State and all these other, things. And at some point, you got to be smarter.
Right. Here's the other thing, Anwar, along those lines. In the future, 9 conference games, plus you got to play a Power 4. That's 10. That means you've got 2 extra. Some might think that means Mercer and Sanford go off the schedules. I would argue the opposite. I think all those SEC teams that have them on their speed dial, they ain't moving. Why would you? Why would you do that? If you're like A&M and you've already scheduled Sanford right before Texas, why would you change that moving forward?
You already have to have another Power 4 on there. So
that's what I'm saying, right? They're forcing you to go 10 of them. They're forcing you to play 10 Power 4s. If I want to say, look, I got Mercer on the line here. Do we want to play him? I think the answer from your coaching staff and everybody is, hell yes, we want to play him. Tell them to come in.
We don't know if the ACC will ever demand that any of their teams play more than 8.
Right, exactly. Tell them to come play us because we just had whoever, Kentucky, Vandy, Florida, Auburn, whoever it is. We had this team added to our schedule.
I'm just saying, if you cancel this series and your answer for why did you do it is because we thought it was the smartest thing that we could do in terms of trying to put our 2026 team in the most advantageous position possible to compete for a national championship. In retrospect, we don't think playing in the opening game of the season against the literal toughest team that we played against all season, you know what? Surprise. Probably shouldn't have played that game in August.
Yeah, we might see
it's just dumb. It was dumb for Ohio State, and they got away with it. It's dumb to play such a game of jeopardy. Like, that's like if the most important game in an NFL season was Cowboys and Eagles to start the season. Any preseason games? Nope, none.
Right. But
first game, the division's on the line. Go play.
Again, they talk to that executive director every week. The committee has said that this new thing they're putting in and they're supposed to consider is they give you credit. I know
we're going to find out real quick.
We're going to find out how much they believe in this, but they're supposed to be saying if you schedule tough teams, we're not punishing you
as much. A lot of things, and they can't make them all come true.
Like, can they really say to Texas, we're not going to punish you for a 7-point loss at Ohio State? We're going to find out. We might find out.
Wins out, they're going to be borderline somewhere close to that top 10. And if they lose to Texas Tech and get their second loss, they're going to go, whoa, clutch their pearls. You said we're not supposed to get punished for playing in the championship game. And the things that I'm saying, which is, dude, they played Tech twice. Tech would have beaten them twice. At least one of them was a complete smoke job. Like, they're not going to put them in as an at-large over teams that are more credible. But, Chad, they keep telling us, this is where Anwar and I ended up yesterday, which was they got to pick between, do we save the championship games? Do we tell everybody that the championship games can cost you? Or do we tell people that scheduling hard can cost you? They're not giving up those championship games.
That Verizon money, that AT&T money,
they're not going to do it.
Spectrum money, all of that money. They're not giving that up.
They're not going to go an entire offseason where SEC coaches are saying, I don't even know why we play in the SEC. We shouldn't even have an SEC championship because it cost one of our teams.
I know.
They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it.
Yeah, and you can call me an old man fan, but I kind of dug that Clemson beating SMU thing just from the standpoint of, hey, you want in, win the game. And they had 3 losses, but they won the game. Now, if you go in with 3 losses and you lose and you have 4 losses, I think the committee's going to say to you, thanks for playing.
Hey, I don't hate on any team that qualifies. They did it within the rules. They won their conference. All I'm saying is if you lose your conference,
right,
you've been told that's not supposed to impact you, that you're not going to get punished. Well, you've also told people that you're not going to punish them if you schedule hard out of conference. And at some point, it's going to come down to which of these 2 teams are we going to punish? And I'm telling you, it's going to be easier for them to punish Texas than it would be, I don't know. And a 1-loss or a 2-loss Indiana team, right? Let's say Indiana was 2. I don't know. Somebody who's otherwise in. Texas Tech's probably the best example. BYU beats them. And then you're leaving Texas Tech out. Like, it gets to be, I don't think the committee, because they would otherwise be in. Tech would be 6th, but then they drop and lose it. I don't know. It's a weird sliding. They cannot make everybody happy.
Let me grab this super chat because y'all need to help me with this. Chris,
I need to go cook dinner, so we got to go.
Yeah, $4.99. What about Duke winning the ACC? There could be 2 group of 5s with the 5 highest ranked champions regardless of conference. I don't understand that at all. I don't understand what Chris is saying.
I mean, ultimately, I don't care. Because he's saying if Duke wins the ACC, that the highest rated Duke, there could be 2.
Is that Chris? Is that just you going a long way for a Duke is a group of 5 joke? Is that what you're doing there?
No, he's saying that it's the 5 highest rated conference champions. In a world where Duke wins the ACC, there could be 2 other conference champions who are ranked ahead of Duke in the final standings. That's what he's saying. So if Duke were to win the ACC, could there be 2 group of 5s champions that make it?
Oh, ahead of Duke. I
Yes.
see. I see. Okay,
No,
yeah. I
because
don't know.
you're only going to put in one group of 5 champ, I believe. So I don't.
He's saying if they're ranked higher, though, would that?
But the only USF's the only group of 5 team that's currently ranked at this moment.
But maybe not by the time we get to the end of the deal.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look. It is the 5 highest rated champs, but that's insulting the ACC. Well done, Chris.
But at the end of the day, like I said, the ACC is a 1-bid league. So if they were to lose their spot to it doesn't matter. That's why I said it doesn't matter, because you would be replacing one automatic with essentially another automatic, and it wouldn't impact any of the other teams, I think, as a byproduct of that.
Yeah,
that just be true for the ACC.
Yeah, somebody's saying ACC is not guaranteed a spot. Bobby, I guess technically that is true. I've always thought of it.
That's what I'm saying. In a world where that happens, that's just bad for the ACC, but doesn't impact anything.
Yeah, but there's nothing. Man, I don't see anything other than, because Cincinnati's in the Big 12 now. Yeah, I mean, Anwar's right. His USF Bulls are sitting at 24. There's nobody else.
I'm going to enjoy this until someone hires away my coach, and then we're back to the Charlie Strong days.
Hey, you got something to enjoy, though. What do we say, Chad? Don't look a gift horse in the mouth.
And you know what the greatest thing about it is, Catch? There's not a single Longhorn fan that cares. So it's not like I graduated from Tech. They're like, screw you. Or like Chad, who's an Aggie, right? Everybody's like, oh, good Anwar. You have a little team to root for. So I can literally say go Bulls and no one cares, because everyone knows when USF gets to the playoffs, unless they're playing Florida, they're going to lose the first round match. But all that matters to me is that they're ranked, and it doesn't offend anybody here. It's a win-win.
Anwar, I don't know what you're talking about. I like them to go to Athens and beat Georgia if that was the matchup. Boom, Bulls win.
I mean, we got a good quarterback and we got a good defense.
What do they say? 12 over.
They did what Texas couldn't do.
12 over 5 happens every year, right, guys? Come on.
All right, let's wrap it up.
Get out of here. All right, thank y'all for jumping in. Texas is in for at least this week. Wrap it up. Thank y'all for joining us. Thank you for supporting us. We're Orange Bloods Live.